Have you ever noticed that some people seem calm during chaos, practical when things go wrong, and surprisingly independent without even trying? Maybe it's a coworker who never panics when technology fails, or a parent who somehow knows how to fix everything with basic tools and common sense, or a friend who doesn't need constant validation but still shows up for everyone else. If you look closely, many of those people belong to one particular generation, Gen X. Born roughly between the mid-1960s and early 1980s, Generation X often grew up in a world that looked very different from today. No smartphones, no social media, sometimes even coming home to an empty house after school while parents were still at work. And interestingly, those experiences quietly shaped them. Today, psychologists often say Gen X developed a set of hidden strengths that many people don't immediately notice, but once you see them, they're impossible to ignore. In this video, we're going to explore 7 hidden strengths many people from Gen X share. These aren't loud or flashy traits, they're quieter abilities, like resilience, independence, emotional balance, and a surprising ability to adapt. And by the end, you might even realize some of these strengths could be developing in you, too. Let's begin. Ever wondered why some people seem incredibly comfortable figuring things out on their own? Picture this. It's the 1980s. A kid comes home from school. The house is quiet. No parents yet. No phone to call friends instantly. No internet to search for answers. So what do? They improvise. They make snacks. They fix small problems. They entertain themselves. They learn how to solve boredom with creativity. I once knew someone who grew up like this. If something broke, he didn't immediately ask for help. He experimented until he figured it out. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but every time he learned. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle life's problems. And many Gen X individuals develop this naturally. While other generations sometimes grew up with constant guidance, Gen X often had to rely on their own judgment. At first, it might seem like a small thing, but over time, that independence becomes a powerful advantage. Because when life gets complicated, self-reliant people rarely freeze. They simply start figuring things out, and that's a quiet superpower. Now, here's something fascinating. Gen X might be the last generation that remembers life fully before the internet, and the first generation that adapted to it as adults. Picture someone who grew up using cassette tapes, payphones, and handwritten letters, and later learned email, smartphones, and social media. That's a huge cultural shift. I once worked with someone who joked about this. He said, "I learned how to use a typewriter in school, and now I manage cloud software at work." That's quite the transition. Psychologists often say people who experience major technological shifts develop cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt to new systems without losing their grounding. Gen X learned how to navigate both analog and digital worlds. They remember slower communication, but they also understand modern technology. And that combination creates a rare advantage: perspective. They know that not everything needs to be instant, but they also know how to move fast when it matters. Now, have you ever met someone who doesn't complain much but somehow handles difficult situations incredibly well? Here's a story. A friend once told me about losing his job during a major economic downturn. Instead of panicking publicly or posting about it online, he quietly started adjusting his plans. He cut expenses, updated his skills, looked for opportunities. A few months later, he landed a better role. When I asked how he stayed calm, he simply said, "You just deal with it." That mindset is surprisingly common among Gen X. Many of them grew up during economic changes, shifting job markets, and cultural transitions. Because of that, they learned early that stability isn't guaranteed. Psychologists call this resilience through experience. Instead of expecting life to always go smoothly, resilient people expect challenges and prepare for them mentally. And when something goes wrong, they don't collapse, they adapt. Picture this scenario. Someone posts something online and doesn't get many likes. For some people, that can feel surprisingly upsetting. But for many Gen X individuals, that kind of external validation was never a major part of their upbringing. They didn't grow up measuring their worth through social feedback loops. Instead, they developed something psychologists call internal validation, meaning their sense of value comes from personal standards rather than public approval. I once knew a manager who never seemed affected by office gossip or popularity contests. He simply focused on doing good work and treating people fairly. When someone asked how he stayed so calm, he laughed and said, "I stopped worrying about what everyone thinks a long time ago." That's emotional independence. And in a world where people constantly compare themselves online, that mindset can be incredibly freeing. Ever wondered why some people instinctively try to fix problems instead of just talking about them? Here's a small example. Imagine the power goes out during a family gathering. Some people immediately reach for their phones or start worrying, but someone from Gen X might quietly grab flashlights, check the fuse box, and start organizing the situation. Not because they're superheroes, but because they grew up learning hands-on problem solving. Many schools, homes, and communities once emphasized practical skills, repairing things, troubleshooting, adapting. Psychologists sometimes call this solution-oriented thinking. Instead of dwelling on the problem, the brain shifts quickly toward possible fixes. And in stressful moments, that mindset becomes incredibly valuable. Because calm problem solvers often become the people everyone else turns to. Here's something many people don't realize. Gen X lived through major cultural shifts, from pre-internet childhoods to modern digital life, from slower economies to globalized careers. And when people experience multiple eras like that, something interesting happens. They develop perspective. Picture someone who remembers life without constant notifications, but also understands modern convenience. They know technology can be helpful, but they also know it isn't everything. That balance often shows up in their attitude towards work, relationships, and stress. I once heard someone say, "Some problems feel huge today, but 5 years from now, they won't even matter." That kind of thinking doesn't come from books, it comes from experience. And finally, here's a strength people rarely talk about: loyalty. Many Gen X individuals grew up valuing long-term relationships, whether in friendships, careers, or family life. Instead of constantly chasing the next new thing, they often invest deeply in what already matters. I once knew a colleague who had been friends with the same group of people since high school. Decades later, they still met regularly. When someone asked why he kept those friendships so strong, he said something simple: because good people are rare. Psychologists call this relationship stability, the ability to maintain meaningful connections over long periods of time. And in a fast-changing world, that kind of loyalty is incredibly valuable. So when people talk about Gen X, sometimes they describe them as quiet, practical, even a little reserved. But beneath that calm surface, there are powerful strengths: self-reliance, adaptability between old and new worlds, resilience during uncertainty, emotional independence, practical problem solving, balanced life perspective, and deep loyalty to the people that matter. These traits might not always be loud or flashy, but in many ways, they're the kind of strengths that keep families, workplaces, and communities stable. And here's the interesting part. Even if you're not from Gen X, these qualities can still be learned. Resilience grows through challenges. Independence grows through experience. Perspective grows through time. So maybe the real question is this: which of these strengths do you recognize in yourself or in someone you know? If this video resonated with you, comment below and share your story. Do you think Gen X has unique strengths people often overlook? And if you enjoyed this kind of psychology content, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone from Gen X, and subscribe for more insights into human behavior and the hidden patterns that shape our lives. Because sometimes the quietest generations have the strongest lessons to teach.